generally, when they're facing some sort of oppression that they feel must be overcome, and concurrently when they have some sort of vision that they want to achieve and that they're frustrated from achieving. And the conventional wisdom tells us that when people are facing oppression, when people have grievances, they have different options available to them. And the first option that's often cited is elections. If you've got a problem, you should vote for different people in office. Go through conventional party politics, start your own political party, or file a lawsuit, use the legal system. And to be sure, there are countries and societies in which these means have been very effective at making change. And then there are societies in which these are partially effective, and then there are societies in which these really are not effective. And indeed, they can be effective in one society for one issue, but not necessarily another. For example, minorities in a democracy still may not be able to get up that critical mass of numbers because it's a minority group to be able to vote, to get laws changed. On the other hand, a majority of democracies can redress grievances this way more easily. So the second option is if elections and the legal system seem insufficient, people will try to negotiate. They're often told to negotiate, and indeed negotiations sometimes work. There's a real science and an art to negotiating, which I respect a great deal, but there are circumstances in which negotiations fail. And there are situations as well when negotiated agreements are come to and quickly breached because there's no enforcement mechanism. The third is third-party intervention. If negotiations, elections, lawsuits have failed, maybe some powerful third party will come and help those who are oppressed find leverage, find a way to change the situation. And indeed, sometimes it works, yet we also know that third parties may have their own agendas. They may not come at all. Or they may come, but they may not have the power to actually change things because they're external to the conflict. And at that point, when those three options are exhausted, generally some people give up hope, become passive or apathetic. Other people might decide, okay, well, we need to engage in, quote unquote, the strongest way of trying to fight, which is violence, some sort of insurrectionary movements. My point is that those four options have had millions, if not billions of dollars devoted to their research, millions of pages written about them. And at least I can vouch for the first three that all of them can be quite useful in certain circumstances. But there is another option that's gotten a lot less attention. And that is when other traditional means have failed. When other traditional means have failed, thank you, there is an option to wage nonviolent action. There is an option to wage nonviolent conflict. And my next slide, you'll see I'm going to go over quite a few cases in the last 25 years where this is exactly what people have done. One of the great things about nonviolent conflict is that it's also not geographically or culturally specific. It's been waged by people of all religions on every continent on Earth except for Antarctica, so far as I know, and by people of all ages and all persuasions. So just broadly, and I won't go through every case one by one, but you saw dictators who were supported by the United States, Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines in 1986, Augusto Pinochet in Chile in 1988, dictators who had no compunction about being able to kill their own people in order to maintain their rule, both ousted by and large by nonviolent movements in those respective years up there. Of less attention is the first Palestinian Intifada from 87 to 89, in which Israeli deaths went down dramatically as people in the occupied territories engaged in boycotts, setting up alternative schools, strikes, protests, a wide range of nonviolent sanctions. Then there are the cases that relate to the end of communism, Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, all of which engaged in nonviolent forms of struggle against the Soviet Union. Poland from 80 to 89, the other states for more towards the end of their time. And I would note that of the states listed there, at least the Baltics, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, all of those, subsequent to those nonviolent struggles, have embraced democracy very, very rapidly. You also have cases where it didn't work. Ostensibly didn't work. I mean, in Burma in 1988, there were massacres. That movement did not rise again anytime soon thereafter. And of course, in China in 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacres. So by no means am I being triumphalist and saying, my gosh, this will work all the time everywhere. What I'm saying is that it really needs further research and further study and further attention to figure out where and why and how it can work when it can. I also point out that in Russia in 1991, this was when there was increasing political and economic liberalization in that state. There was a hardline coup designed to take the Soviet Union back, to reverse a lot of the political change that had taken place. That was defeated nonviolently, that coup. South Africa, starting from the early 1980s, that moved from a predominantly armed struggle to a predominantly unarmed struggle as nonviolent methods continued to prove more effective, though this is a topic of debate, so I'm sure there would be people who could disagree, and I would argue that nonviolent tactics became more effective in South Africa and hence were adopted more. Going down, you have what came to be called the Color Revolution. Serbia in 2000, the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic, the dictator of 13 years who launched several wars, a convicted war criminal. The former Soviet Republic of Georgia, Ukraine. So what we're seeing here, look at this. 2000, 2002, 2003, 2004, in Lebanon in 2005 against occupation by Syrian troops. Nepal in 2006 against their monarch. Then Burma again rose unsuccessfully in 2007. But there's really increasing incidents, particularly in the last decade. It's remarkable. And we go here and you see all these sort of ongoing cases that I've listed there. And that's just a few of them. I mean, we could look globally and find many, many more. And these are just the national struggles. I could find struggles against corporations. I could find subnational struggles. I could find local struggles, regional struggles. There is a lot of activity here. And still much of it is going underneath the radar screen of the media and to some extent the academy, but it is getting more mention these days, which is good. So enduring truths. What makes these movements effective? How on earth do nonviolent movements triumph against well-armed or well-financed opponents? How's that happen? Well, one way to get at this question, and I'm going to go back to Gene Sharp here, is to look at power and to ask the question, where does power come from? And Sharp, early on in his work, talked about two different theories of power. And the first one he referred to as the monolithic theory of power. So imagine you have a big triangle, okay? Well, tall, long, thin triangle. And here's your rulers at the top. And at the bottom are all those who are ruled, who seem to have no political power. And the ruler makes rules, and those at the bottom basically have to go along with it. They can't really exert upwards. The decrees come from the top and go to the bottom. If the decrees aren't enough, the government can buy people off with money, and they can certainly repress people and scare them. And if we accept, and this is the model of power that is implicit. No one ever told me that this is what power is, but it was implicit in so much of what we see in history, by the telling of history, by the way in which news is reported, by the way in which we're taught in the academy. This is the default assumption. Power is often, when they talk about using force, as if, what's force? Force is frequently referred to as, frequently refers to violence, as if that is the strongest force. And if you accept this monolithic theory of power, then the best that these people on the bottom can do is hope to knock this person off the top and maybe install their own person, and hopefully that person will be in a better mood and be nicer and do something different. But at the end of the day, that structure is fixed. And what Sharp said is that that theory is actually false. That theory is not how power actually works. So I'm going to put two quotes here. The first one is by the political philosopher Hannah Arendt. And Arendt is talking about what happens in a situation of oppression when fear starts to fall away. When those who are oppressed lose their fear and start acting strategically in an organized way. I'll read it because not all of you can, perhaps in the back. When this happens, the situation changes abruptly. Not only is the rebellion not put down, but the arms themselves sometimes change hands, sometimes even within a few hours. The sudden dramatic breakdown of power that ushers in revolution reveals in a flash how civil obedience to laws, to rulers, to institutions is but the outward manifestation of support and consent. So what's Arendt saying here?